Three tech CEOs just got sworn in as lieutenant colonels, and that's a fairly high rank. That's two steps below being a general, and they got sworn in by Donald Trump, jumping ahead of all these other officers and people who have made, sacrificed and made a career out of being in the military. What do you think is going on here? Jamal, I know everybody's paying attention to the fact that we may or may not be at war with Iran. Israel and Iran still are, for sure. But there is something else going on with the U.S. military and the Trump administration that I wanted to make sure you and I got a chance to talk about. The fact that three tech CEOs just got sworn in as lieutenant colonels, and that's a fairly high rank. That's two steps below being a general, and they got sworn in by Donald Trump, jumping ahead of all these other officers and people who have made, sacrificed and made a career out of being in the military. What do you think is going on here?
So it sounds like there's a what would normally be a rational explanation here, right? Like the Army is trying to bring in high level talent to get them to come into the Army and teach them how to do new things. Now, normally that seems like that happens with consultants. It seems like you just go out and you find people who know different things. They come into the military and they get a chance to help coach the career military officers. What's weird about this in the Trump administration is the very kind of cozy relationship that's happening between corporate America and the government. And it makes you wonder, what don't we know about this deal? What don't we know about the relationship between some of these people and the White House, frankly? And we know that Meta and Palantir are companies that the president has been doing business with and sort of cozying up to. So is this just kind of like a, let's find new talent to bring into the military to teach us how to do new things? Or is it something a lot more nefarious?
Part of the problem, Jamal, is that it's the specific companies and which position of executive is getting this military appointment, right? So like you said, if they had access in a civilian capacity for coordination, great. But the idea that Palantir, Meta, OpenAI, groups that already had their senior leaders behind Trump at the inauguration already have unprecedented access to American data like our social security numbers, our taxpayer history. Now their product officers, their research officers are going to be directly embedded in the military and have access to all that top secret information. I'm like, I thought we were trying to prevent the military tech takeover of the world, right? Like we don't want that to be happening. So why is this what our government is doing right now?
In 1960, end of 1959, 1960, Dwight Eisenhower, the former president, gave his final speech to the nation before he left the nation and before he left the White House. And he warned the nation of this military industrial complex that would be driving policy and could get so powerful that it would overtake the status of the president of the United States, even himself. And so now what we see is not just a complex. It's not very complex, right? It's like the military and tech seem to be completely entwined, just like fingers in a hand. And so the question now is, why are they doing this? Why are these companies? What are they supposed to do? And I know they're members of the Army Reserve, so they get to keep their day jobs and then serve every 2 weeks or weekend a month, like weekend, reserve officers. So there is I guess there's some separation. I guess they still have to deal with the rules about secrets and what you could divulge to whom, but it's all just seems incredibly cozy. And again, with the same companies that you just mentioned, Nayyera, who were sitting right behind Donald Trump when he was inaugurated. And we know that Elon Musk is like best buds with the people who created Palantir. So this is all very, very suspect.
Yeah, I think it's a lot worse than just being cozy. Because if you think about it, now there's people in the military rank who are two steps away from general, but also have access directly to the president. So who do you think they're going to listen to? The Peter Thiel calling up President Trump and saying, hey, leave my guy alone, let him do what he wants to do. And then President Trump picks up the phone as using his commander-in-chief hat and telling the Army Reserve or the Army to leave those guys alone and let them do what they want to do. Like, this totally interrupts the chain of command, the unit cohesion, how we've developed our Army and the civilian oversight of the military. All of that ends up going out of the window when you have these weird relationships. It also goes to what we've talked about, this idea that these tech CEOs like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk don't believe in civilian government. They don't believe in governance or democracy. They think that public service and all the public services that we get in our government should actually be run like a tech company. They want a CEO monarch. That's what they believe. And they are doing this and implementing this without any permission from the rest of us.
Yeah, well, raises a whole host of questions, especially while we're in the middle of what we're doing in Iran right now, where we have the president we have the president bombing Iran without really consulting Congress, going into Iran and, again, bombing, supporting Netanyahu. But at the same time, we saw this morning when the day that we're all recording this, the president also seems to be very upset with Israel for violating the terms of this supposed ceasefire that he negotiated overnight. So we just don't know what's going on. The most disturbing fact, other than the fact that we get drug into another Middle East war that the American public hasn't been educated about, is that he's not even educating members of Congress, even Republican members of Congress who are telling the truth back door, are saying that they're not even getting all the briefings to know what's going on. So we've got this effort to try to contain the president with some legislative solution, but I don't know if that's going to work. Look, here's the reality. If it is true that Iran would not do a deal and Iran was going to develop a nuclear weapon, there is an argument for there being some sort of military action in Iran. That action, however, requires the president to take some steps to educate not only the members of Congress, but also the American public about why this was important, not just when he does it, but to get people on board to know this is something that has to happen. And there's an international community that needs to be at stake because, frankly, countries just can't go around bombing each other. That doesn't turn out very well.
Well, we're going to learn that. We're going to learn that apparently because we didn't learn that lesson from the Iraq War when some of the similar voices like Netanyahu and like John Bolton and all these other neocons were like, hey, we can bomb our way to success and victory. Well, really, that actually at the other side of it, the military action is used as a threat to further a diplomatic action. And Trump had told us, the American public, I'm going to wait 2 weeks. I'm going to leave a 2-week window for negotiations.
Right.
You know who was doing that negotiating? Leaders in Europe with Iran's foreign minister. I am pretty certain that Netanyahu just called him up on the phone and was like, hey, you're missing this window of opportunity. And as Netanyahu has played him to get what works for Israel, the same way that Russia has played him to get what works for Putin. That's the common thread here, is that Trump announces ceasefires in the Ukraine, announces it in Iran and Israel, but then his quote unquote allies, Netanyahu and Putin, people he thinks he has great relationships with, do what they want to do anyway. And the United States ends up being caught holding the bag. So what we know right now is that the United States did indeed attack 3 of the 4 nuclear sites for development. We don't know how successful those attacks were in destroying all the equipment. We don't know if Iran indeed transferred out the uranium in advance. We don't know if the nuclear scientists or information has been shared. Like, we actually don't know if we have stopped Iran's nuclear program. Like, you need to investigate that. You need to let people in to see all of this. So the idea that you are bombing your way to success is not a strategic end. It is a story of the moment. And then to wake up the next day and hear, oh, this amazing ceasefire got broken. Of course it did. Israel and Iran never announced a ceasefire. This is all Trump trying to pull a story together in real time without pausing to think it through and understand what the long-term implications are.
Yeah, I was reading a story yesterday. It was from Foreign Affairs magazine, but it was about the Iran-Iraq war that happened in the 1980s. 8-year-long war. 1 million people died on both sides of the war. Iraq, it was after the overthrow of the Shah, and Iraq, the Saddam Hussein, who we all know from our war against him, went into Iran with the support of the United States intelligence community, the Soviets, many other Middle Eastern countries, went into Iran to attack to try to, overthrow the Ayatollah. Now, what happened? He wasn't able to do it. But the other part of it is he strengthened the mullahs. And so all the folks in Iran that we were against actually ended up getting stronger because they all felt like the country felt like it was under attack from all the other powers, and they needed to band together to defend Iran, not necessarily just defend the mullahs, but the mullahs got to be more influential. They also had greater control over the military. They had greater control over the intelligence assets. They were able to do all these things. So this is the law of unintended consequences. When you start going into countries without thinking through what's happening, without support of the local people on the ground, without understanding how these things work together, you end up having unintended consequences that then blow back at us and become even worse over time. That's the thing that we also have to really be worried about when we see the president taking these actions with these with these people around him that we don't necessarily trust, like Tulsi Gabbard and Hegseth and, all these sort of random folks who may or may not be in the room when the president's making these decisions. But he doesn't have the best people who are giving him advice about this, and they're making really consequential decisions without the level of thinking that those of us who are going to bear the brunt of the responsibility are going to have to face. It would like
well, he's even kicked out Tulsi Gabbard. She's the head of the National
Right.
Intelligence. And because she said on the record and has continued to say, well, there is no intel that actually is showing Iran is less than 6 months away from a nuclear bomb. Like the idea that, yes, they have the uranium, but they don't necessarily have the trigger mechanisms or all the casing that you need. All the mechanics aren't there. So we had time to figure this out, right? So that went against Trump's story. That certainly went against Netanyahu's story, who for 30 years, Netanyahu has been trying to get America to bomb Iran and do the dirty work for them, right? So Tulsi Gabbard's been eliminated from this group. We don't have a national security advisor. There's one negotiator for all the crises. He's doing Gaza negotiations, he's doing Ukraine negotiations, and now suddenly he's going to do Iran also. But what you do have is you have Pete Hegseth, who's a TV guy, who will go out there and say whatever Trump wants him to say. So
Right.
that's how Trump is making these decisions. It's not, even in the first term, at least there were seasoned generals and people with experience in the Iraq and Afghanistan war who learned the lessons of what happens when the United States bombs a country and then ends up having to take responsibility for the fallout. At least literally, even in Afghanistan and Iraq, we had other allies with us. Like there is nobody on board right now with what the United States is doing and how it's operating. Even Russia is like, yo, can you slow your roll a little bit? So this is America alone. Like you said it before, this is a Trump acting like a cowboy. He's not bringing along the American people. He's not bringing along Congress at all. And there's no logic or rationale that we've been given about how this has to happen at this moment. And the irony of all of this is we actually do have tools to do all the things that we've talked about.
Right.
We have the tools for strategy. We also have the tools for getting people in a country who are opposed to a dictator to come on our side. There's what we did in the Soviet Union of communicating behind the Iron Curtain.
Are you talking about things like Voice of America, maybe?
Yes.
Oh.
The entire program that we had because Iran internet, a lot of people VPN on the internet so they can get news from the outside world. We had entire programs in the State Department specifically communicating people in Iran in their language about what the real news is. That's all been shut down. Like all
right,
of those,
that's right. That was the point I wanted to get to. Right, this is part of the Doge problem. Is we got rid of the ability for our foreign service officers to actually influence what happens in some of these countries.
And that's what you need is not bomb the country, suddenly have all these people who would have been on our side about regime change or against the Ayatollahs feeling like, oh my God, you attacked my country. Because I can tell you right now, a foreign country were to attack us and say, oh yeah, this was a preemptive strike. I wouldn't be sitting there talking about how Trump is terrible. I would sit there and be like, yo, you attacked America. Like, we got to figure this out. The rallying the flag thing is happening, and we didn't use any of the tools that we had and we've used in the past with the Soviet Union or other autocratic regimes. We didn't use any of those in the Iran situation.
Well, because we got rid of them, right? I mean, the only thing left, I think, still standing at the Voice of America is the Cuba desk, right? And I think they're the only station that still has the full complement of staff that's still communicating, are the people talking in Cuba. Everybody else around the world has been cut, I think, down to 15% of the total number of people who worked for Voice of America. Only have 15% of them who are left still working for Voice of America. How is it that we're supposed to communicate to the rest of the world about our values and about the way of life it is that we think they ought to be paying attention to, revenue when only, you know, a couple hundred people are able to do it for the entire world. I just think it's a travesty. And so here we are, with a government that's been corroded and kind of defanged, and we've got a foreign policy institution that people have taken away all these foreign service officers and USAID and all these places where America had credibility around the world, and we were able to go out and tell people we were going to help and then show up with the help we promised. And now we've got people, literally foreign service officers, leaving countries under the dead of night because they're afraid of being, you know, picked up because the foreign service, America, is not living up to its obligations to organizations that we were funding on the ground. That is the America of the Trump world, which is one that we're retreating from any positions of leadership to one where the only power we have now is hard power, and they think that is helpful because they went and bombed Iran.
Oh, I've got another nugget for you. Do you know who's in charge of counterterrorism right now? It's
Mm.
some 22, 23-year-old whose previous job was
Oh,
doing some kind of entry level work for landscaping, but
I
he's
saw
loyal
that.
to Trump and family are donors. He is the head of counterterrorism. I encourage everyone to go and Google head of counterterrorism Trump and just Google image what his headshot looks like.
Yeah.
You could, I mean, it is comical and scary at this point. That's who's in charge of counterterrorism. And I mentioned that because you're hearing all this talk about, oh, Iran might activate sleeper cells. I'm like, okay, again, what's the evidence? What's the history here? How does that actually work? But after the bombing of Iraq, what did we get? We didn't get a democratic government over there. We didn't get all these groups suddenly working together. No, there were lots of infighting. There's a power vacuum. We got ISIS coming out
Right.
of that whole situation. So right now, knowing that bombing of Iran may leave a power vacuum, they're already saying there's a challenge potentially with Americans being targets overseas and domestically. What kind of Yahoo do you got in charge of counterterrorism?
I mean, look, I will tell you, I was, as I think you know, I was in Europe for the weekend, for the last few days, and we were there for about 4 or 5 days in France, and we flew back on Monday from Paris. And I will tell you, I was a little concerned, one, going through the airport, and then two, being on a transatlantic flight while this is happening. And we know that Iran's not just going to sit back and allow this to happen. There's no telling what would happen. But and what would happen by some Yahoo who is just paying attention to it and decide that they want to do something to an American to sort of prove the point because they've been watching it on TikTok and on WhatsApp for the last and hearing about it for the last couple of weeks. So, you know, it's a real concern, I think, for Americans who live abroad who ought to be concerned about what their safety is. But the concern ought to be lodged at the White House for why are we going around and stoking fires and these embers without really paying a lot of attention to what the blowback will be and what the rationale is for doing it.
Yeah. So what we're saying is that these are things that take some careful thought and consideration. And the people aren't in place right now who would do that. The people in place right now will tell Trump what he wants to hear or give him the answers that he's only looking for in the moment and not tell him about anything coming up ahead. And this is already a president who is deeply influenced by Netanyahu and Putin and the last person who talked to him in the room. And what that means is that our relationship with the world, our foreign policy is very erratic right now. We hear one thing one day, the next day it changes. And yes, they're going to try to sell you on the idea that this unpredictability means that no one knows what he's going to do next. You know how things work better when your allies and people understand what's going to happen and you can all work together for a common objective. That is better for the world. That's better for the economy. We haven't even talked about the economic impact of the fact that Iran is able to block any oil and supplies coming out of the Persian Gulf. They can use their Houthi connections to stop it from the Red Sea. I mean, there's going to be an economic consequence on top of
Yeah, you
the
could mine the
tariff
Straits of
that
Hormuz,
Trump
right?
keeps operating. Yeah, that Trump keeps threatening.
Right. Yeah, they could put mines in the Straits of Hormuz. You could stop ships from being able to pass through easily. Look, there's a lot of things here. The follow-on effects of this are not going to be minimal, and I think everybody has to be guarded for it. But we also have to hold this government accountable internally to make sure that it is acting in the best interest of America. Because the other part is we don't actually know how Trump is making these decisions, or who he's making them for, or what the impact is about what comes later, and what deal it is that he made or his sons are making as they're traveling the world doing business deals, and they're communicating that stuff back to their dad. That is the problem when you have a government and a president who does not have a blind trust for his income, whose sons are operating his business in his own name and then reporting back to him on a regular basis about what those business deals are, and hosting events for people to be able to invest in his meme coin, regardless of how much money they put in, which I gotta believe the intelligence services are monitoring the people who are doing this, because it's just a wide open invitation for foreign influence. So all those things, whether he did it or not, they raise questions about what the American president is up to, why he's doing it, and who benefits. And if it's not us, we need to know who, and we need to shut it down.
Tech CEOs, that's who's benefiting, folks. Tech CEOs, right? Because while Trump is following his own interests financially, don't forget these other billionaires who've had access to all of our information are also following their financial interests. But well, Jamal, I think that's another cheery note to leave it at today, as we so often do. But hey, at least we're all better informed and we know what to keep an eye out for. One of the last things I want to say is let's listen to the story that Trump is telling us and his friends are telling us. Let's be very critical about what we're hearing, and not just accepting that, oh, there's a ceasefire. Oh, we won this war. Oh, we've ended their nuclear program. We need the evidence and we need the proof, and we need, I guess, multiple sources now to verify that what the president of the United States is saying is indeed actually happening.
What's up with Iran? Show us the receipts. Thank you. Good to be here. Good to talk to you again there.